Hello and welcome to this afternoon session of the Business Analyst Conference Europe 2020 by IRM UK. My name's Jane Piper and this session is Business Model Your Career. I hope it's a useful session for you business analysts who can apply the skills that you use in your daily job to analyze business problems and come up with solutions. Instead, apply these skills to yourself and your career. My name's Jane Piper. I'm an organisational psychologist. What's an organisational psychologist? Well, like you, I also solve problems, hopefully making work and workplaces better for people and organisations. So in this session today, what I will be covering when I'm looking at Business Model Your Career is helping you understand how you can use business models, and I'll use a particular business model generation. If you haven't heard about that, I will cover it briefly. Then using that to understand more about how you add value to an organization or your customers. We will cover an example with the help of demonstration of a senior business analyst, Rachel Drinkwater, will join me, and we will actually use the business model to be able to plot out her career. Then the big question with always after analysis is, so what? What does this mean? And some next steps. So let's get started. Let's take a step back. I mean, it's a very strange world that we're living in at the moment. But even so, think about how many jobs you've had so far. And think about a 15-year-old leaving school at the moment. What do you think are the number of different jobs that he or she is likely to have? And in how many different industries? If you're on the live, watching this live, then note some ideas down in the chat. We'll be able to see them. A 15-year-old today can expect to have 17 different jobs at least. And I wonder, with all the changes which have happened over COVID times, whether that will be even more. And they are probably likely to work in at least 5 different industries. The amount of change over a career span, and even the length of a career span, is extending and much different than it was previously. Previously, people were able to join an organisation and work their way up slowly a career ladder from a junior position to a senior position to a middle management position and eventually retire with a nice package. This career ladder model has gone, and most days careers look more squiggly. They wander from one side step to another, and there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, having the idea in mind that your career will follow some sort of perfect ladder can actually lead to false expectations. When it comes to business modeling a career, we're looking at this to how to help you can keep reinventing your career, because we live in a very VUCA world, no more evident than these times, a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. So having one answer for your career is never going to work. There might be one right answer for a short period of time, but it won't last. However, even though we live in a very rapidly changing world, what we like to do, what we're good at, and what we're interested in tend to be quite core and not change. So if you can understand these, then you can understand how you can offer those to your organization or your customers. If you can understand why that's of value to them and who it's of value to, then you can create more value for yourself and how much you get as a salary or as a reward from satisfaction or as fees from customers, and also add more value to the organization or the customers you're working for. Let's take a quick look at the business model generation canvas. The business model generation looks at organizations. It looks how to create, deliver, and capture value. And I'm sure some of you may have used this model when you're analyzing a business. You can look at smaller parts of an organization or even a team to understand what they are doing. It's built up of 9 different building blocks, and it was developed by Alexander Osterwald and Yves Pigner at the IMD University during a PhD study on innovation. Here's a quick snapshot of the model, and you can see how it looks at these 9 different building blocks, starting with, on this left-hand side, really trying to understand what the organization or team or part of the organization does and who helps achieve it. So what are the key activities? What are the key resources? And who are the key partners that help? Next, moving on to the right-hand side, understanding who are the customers or customer segments and how you reach them, how you market them, how you distribute goods to them, how you relate to them. And then understanding the most important part is what is the real benefit, the value proposition that customers get from working with this organization. What comes out for them? And understanding that core value is essential to understanding whatever processes go on in the organizations, how they can add more value. Of course, all added up, there also is some costs that come with doing this and some revenue or income that comes in. Adapting this model takes basically the similar 9 blocks, but looks at how you personally can create, deliver, and capture value for your organization you work for or for your customers. It's looking at your career in an entrepreneurial way. It's about selling your knowledge, and sometimes we don't think about that, but essentially we are selling our knowledge and experience and our skills to either our employers for a salary or to customers. And many of us would like to be able to sell more of that, and we hopefully also get other intrinsic rewards, the satisfaction for having done a good job, the satisfaction for actually being able to use our skills and experience. The more you understand about your unique value and how it helps your organization or helps other people, the more you can actually extract value. So let's take a quick look at this model, but then I think the really exciting part will be when we move next to actually looking at demonstrating this. Here is the personal business model canvas. And what you can see, and in this demonstration, we will focus only on 4 of these key areas, but basically you can see the same model but adapted to look at you. So we're looking at, on this side, what you do and what you have and who may be the people or the partners that help you. So that looks at what your actual activities are and what skills, knowledge and experience you have. Then we look at who you help and how they know about you. So who are your customers or your employers? What are they actually looking for? And how do they know that you're actually there to help you? Which is the difference between sometimes being in a salary job, though may not, some companies have internal consulting models, but difference between actually also, it's not just being able to help and be willing to help, but people also need to know how you can help them. Finally, it comes up with your personal value add, your unique selling proposition, if you want to use it in marketing terms. Finally, there's what you give and it's what you get. As we say, it's not all about money, but there also may be other intrinsic rewards that you gain from working in an organization, the satisfaction of having done a good job, the social relationships with other people, the ability to use your skills and experience. So let's start with the small steps, and these are the steps I'll work through with Rachel. Let's start all about you. Let's start with what do you do? That's really quite simple. We'll be looking at the critical tasks that you perform, trying to look at 5 or 6 of these. Generally, I imagine in business analysts and mental activities. And just to help, if you're doing this, these are the doing words, the verbs. These are things that you do. It's not yet about the value. And then let's look at the key resources. Who are you? What are your special, unique skills and ability that you use to add value when you're doing this? Is it spatial reasoning, visual communication? Is it problem solving? What do you do? Then also think about what's your strong driver. What drives you to do this? What are your interests? Why do you like doing this? Do you like helping people? Do you like solving problems? Do you like interacting with groups and teams? And then thinking also about your personality, the parts of you, the outgoing, are you thoughtful, how this helps and brings value. The next section, we look at your customers, or who do you help? It's probably in most organizations your boss. If you perform well, your boss looks good. It's related to the person or the organization who's paying your salary or your invoice, how you help them, otherwise they probably wouldn't pay for the services. It looks also, you need to think about internal customers and perhaps your organization's customers, and then the wider community even as to what your organization does. And it could be communities of professionals or common interests, such as this business analysis community. Finally, the difficult question is how we put it all together. It's how you bring your value from this left-hand side to right-hand side and bring it together so that how you help, what helps those people get their job done, to deliver, to meet their needs, what you satisfy, what you achieve for them. So you might improve performance, you might reduce costs, you might increase pleasure or enjoyment, you might fulfill an emotional or social need. So now let's see it in action. So I'd like to welcome Rachel Drinkwater, who is assisting me today and very generously sharing her career journey. And so we will be demonstrating this using the mural board. So welcome, Rachel.
Thanks.
So what I'd like to do now is get Rachel to share with you a little bit of her career history so you can understand as we work on developing the business model canvas that you can see how that works. So I'm just going to now we'll have a quick look at Rachel, if you want to start us through talking about your career.
Thanks, Jane. So I'm Rachel Drinkwater. I work for Coventry University and I've been a business analyst for around 16 years now. And my journey started quite a traditional sense, did my A-levels, and then I did a BSc, Business Information Systems at De Montfort University, my undergraduate degree. That was a sandwich year, sandwich placement degree. So I did my third year with Mars. So my industrial placement there. And then I took a graduate scheme when I graduated, so joined Jaguar Land Rover. And I moved around quite a bit after that, so joined a number of big corporates and gradually developed more and more experience as a business analyst, progressing from a junior BA all the way through to my current position now as a senior business analyst. But in that time, I also picked up some of the job roles. So I got involved in marketing for Jaguar Land Rover. I was a sales volume planning analyst. I was a procurement business analyst for Cemex. I was very process oriented for National Grid. And when I was working for Severn Trent, we started to move into a world of digital transformation. So I headed up an app squad where we were doing some rapid, really agile development, building apps, and also sort of doing a lot of digital transformation work. So a very different world. Whilst I was working for Severn Trent, I'd always wanted to continue my academic journey, and I'd sort of launched into this career, and I had been doing this career for about 10 years. And I always had that itch to do some more academic work, and I wanted to get a master's. And at the time I was, well, still am very actively involved in the theatre. I sit on the board of directors of a theatre company. And that sort of inspired me to take a bit of a branch off from this sort of very corporate, very analytical career and do something very creative. And I decided to go and do a master's in creative and media enterprise at Warwick University. A lot of people sort of raised their eyebrows and sort of looked at me a little bit suspiciously, and I thought this was a very strange segue in a very successful analytical career. But for me, it was the opportunity to try something different. After a couple of months of this, I identified that I probably didn't want a career in the creative industries. I'd probably keep that as more of a hobby. But what I did find was a lot of the things that I was studying, we did a lot of work around digital transformation, about the effects of the digital and the digital world on society and people's lives and business. And I started to realize that we were going to go this big transition and this big digital transformation within Severn Trent. And at the same time, I was studying this in an entirely different context. And as I was to bring all these concepts from this sort of arts degree into the corporate world. And around this time, a lot of other people in the industry were starting to talk very much about sort of creativity and innovation in the workplace. So I sort of progressed with my degree, and I loved it. I had a brilliant time doing the degree, and I learned a huge amount. It gave me a really different perspective on the world, especially working with people that were 10 years younger than me and had a very different perspective on life. So I got a real view on a different generation almost. So not quite a different generation, but you know, people that were significantly younger than me. Yeah. So I sort of started to grow two paths. And as I was studying my creative and media enterprise degree, I started to really focus my research on students and the impact on using digital devices and digital technologies was having on their brains and their ability to learn. So I was bringing that corporate IT experience into the arts degree and then taking it back into the workplace, if you like. And that led me to my current role really at Coventry University, having studied students and having studied the way people interact with learning in a digital sphere. At the perfect time, the role at Coventry came up, and that sort of led me into the direction I'm in now. But I didn't want to give up that new road, that new path that I created. So I still do a lot of creative work. I am a freelance writer. I do a lot of blogging. I'm still on the board of directors for Teatro, and I'm a contributing writer for the British Computer Society. And as you can see, they're popping up some of those varied job roles that I've held. At Coventry University, I'm also a guest lecturer as well, so I'm sharing that knowledge that I've developed throughout my career and in those sort of more creative sides as well, I mean, in my degrees. So yeah, quite an interesting journey, I think.
Yeah, definitely a very interesting journey. And what comes back to the point we made earlier, that, you know, starting in a career ladder and working your way up in a single career is often not possible anymore in this VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. And having a lot of skills and bringing them together to create a new and unique way of looking at things, it can be a question of timing, as you say, where things are. So let's have a look now at the business model, and we'll go over to the mural whiteboard and just changing screens here. Bear with me for a minute. Okay, so now we're over on the mural whiteboard, and what I want to do now is, as we were explaining, start with only a few of these areas rather than all 9. So I'm just going to zoom out. You can see all 9 here on the screen. If I just zoom out a little bit further, you can see all 9 here. But what we'll do is we'll actually concentrate on the key activities, key resources, the customer segments, and then the value proposition. So let me just zoom in there to key activities and start with Rachel. What would you say are the 5 or 6 key activities that you really focus on?
So probably there are a number of core activities, I guess, in the business analysis world. And then we sort of, depending on the organization you're in or the type of personality you are, you sort of branch out. So I'll start with the real core stuff. And I guess the big one of those is requirements capture. And I guess tied into that is facilitation. So you tend to facilitate a lot of workshops and facilitate those interactions with stakeholders, those people who have some kind of invested interest in the work you're doing. So they're the sort of the core things. Something that I do think is key to the BA role is stakeholder relationship management. So it's building those relationships with stakeholders, understanding them, getting to know them, getting to know challenges they face on a day-to-day basis, and sort of getting to know their business world as well. The nature of the role is we move around a lot from project to project. So spend, you know, your first period with those people just getting up to speed with that business area or the projects they're working on, and sometimes down to the day-to-day tasks they undertake. So I've said about capturing requirements, and another big part of it is juggling stakeholder needs. So I might have two sets of stakeholders with conflicting needs and conflicting priorities.
Right.
So it's understanding how that aligns to the strategy. In fact, strategic alignment is something I tend to do, certainly in the more senior sphere. As a senior BA, is starting to really understand the strategic alignment of projects and requirements, and ensuring that I'm juggling those stakeholder needs and those priorities and wants, but doing it in a way that contributes to the overall picture.
Mm-hmm.
I've been branching out quite a bit lately. As I was saying before, it's not the same for all BAs, but service and support design. So as we're starting to move down the project life cycle, it's starting to sort of understand what this will look like once we go live and once we start to do embedding activities and such like. And I suppose on top of that, something we do is training and communications. Oops, training and communications, and really selling the product as well.
So you've talked a lot about the key activities in the business analyst role. Is there something there that you also think is a key activity when you think about you as a person? So one is your role and job there, but other things that you do outside, thinking about the writing and the blogging, and is another key activity you do outside of your core business role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've started to really integrate sort of writing and blogging into my life a lot more. At one point it was just really a hobby, but now I find myself, I do a lot of writing for industry publications. So I write for the British Computer Society. I've written articles for a few blogs, generally on digital technology or digital disruption. I'd love to write a chapter of a book, and I'm sort of putting feelers out around that. And internally as well, I do quite a lot of people sort of ask me, oh, I need something writing for this communication, could you put something together? So I'm sort of becoming known as the go-to person for copywriting and things like that, which is really exciting.
Great.
I've mentioned facilitation. I think personally something, I think bringing in the acting side of things, workshop facilitation and public speaking is something I love doing. So if there's an opportunity to get up in front of a room full of people, I'm the first one to hand up. So yeah, should I add those onto the...
Great. So then we look at, thanks for sharing that. I think I'm getting a good feel of some of the skills and how they cross over the different parts of your life. What would be interesting now is to move on to the second question about who you are and what you have. What are the skills and the knowledge and experience that you bring, that are your resources that you rely on? And before we've been talking about what you do, facilitation, but you've touched a little bit about, you know, that is the skill of public speaking, for example. So we're shifting from what you do to the skills that you actually have, or the experience that you have.
Sure. I think the biggest one for me, and it's something that's been sort of mentioned by a number of people that I've worked with, is my ability to empathise with stakeholders. I've mentioned relationship building is a big part of the role, but it's really wanting to do right by the stakeholder and really understanding what they're about and trying to see things from their point of view. Quite often I could be working on a project where some of the stakeholders aren't entirely happy about what's happening. It's a big change program, they're uncertain, they're concerned that this is going to have a negative effect on them. So something I try to do is, before I start bringing them down a path of this vision for the future and what the requirements are, is actually understand those concerns and really try to get to the root of why they're feeling what they're feeling. But I do think that is something fairly unique to me. It's something that I care about and I'm really passionate about. And it's going to sound a little bit silly, but some of that comes from my customer service training. When I was a student, as many people did, I had retail jobs. I worked in supermarkets and in bars and in a card shop. And I got some actually brilliant training. Some of those supermarkets were very big sort of corporate, so I got a good corporate training package of customer service. And I've brought that with me throughout my life. I think I still use those skills on a daily basis, how to look after customers, how to manage customers.
Yeah,
so I think
that's really interesting. And so 2 points just for the people who might be trying to do this themselves is, one, think about, as you said, you'll receive feedback from other people that, you know, you empathize well with stakeholders. So think about what are the things that other people see as positive. And the other one is those skills can go all the way back in your career. And I'll talk a little bit about the end, about creating that narrative, creating that story about when you are telling people about your career, that people like to see a red thread, and they like to see how that skill is developed over time. So if you're in a job interview or pitching for a project or something like that, it's good to bring back some little stories about your background and working in customer service, and that brings your customer service focus. So thanks for sharing that.
Great. So some other things that I've picked up on, so explaining technical concepts. I've worked in IT my entire life. I'm very interested in IT. I think I can blame the movie The Matrix and before that The Net for my interest. So I do have a good solid technical background. I ran a business as a web developer when I was at university. I've studied a little bit of networking. I've done a bit of programming. I'm sort of flirting with Python at the moment. But I also have sort of one foot in the business as well, and that sort of commercial side of things. So I do feel I sort of sit in both camps, and I can explain things to business people in a non-technical way, and I can bring things back and translate them back into technical terminology and sort of what that might look like in a technical solution. A friend of mine in theatre says that I am the ideas person and the problem solver, so I feel I should add that there as well. So problem solving. I've mentioned the sort of writing, the blogging, the copywriting. I think that is a sort of very niche thing, that sort of that creative side I bring to the table. And again, sort of from my degree, that knowledge of the digital world and the marketing side of things, and neuroscience, which I ended up doing quite a bit of research into, and do some conference speaking around as well. So some very different areas there. And then I think, so just thinking about my actual experience, so I bring 16 plus years of business analysis experience. So I'm almost a subject matter expert in business analysis, and that's cross industry as well. I've mentioned public speaking and acting. And then I think, like, my personal traits, I'm generally described as being outgoing, energetic, confident, quite often brought onto projects for my positivity as well. So yeah, I think I'm actually a massive introvert as well. But it comes strangely, but it comes across as being very outgoing and energetic.
Great, that's great, and thanks for sharing about your personal side as well, because that often creates, or is the basis of how you interact with people and work with people. And introversion, extroversion is a good one that, as you say, you don't necessarily, people think, oh, you have to be an extrovert to be wanting to facilitate a workshop. What I tend to look at it is that you don't have to be extroverted, it's just that it'll take you more energy. Some people gain energy from, you know, a lot of interaction with people. Other people gain energy from having time to reflect and think. So it's how you gain your energy. And if you can align that with what you're trying to achieve in life, you know, you've got that right balance between how much energy you want to give out to people and how much energy you need to have on your own time, then you've got a good match between your personal style and job. Let's move over to the customer segment and have a look there at who your customers are.
So I've mentioned stakeholders quite a lot, so stakeholders generally is anybody that's got an interest, positive or negative, in the project or in the piece of work you're working on. And they can be internal, they can be external, they could be sort of an internal customer, which I have a lot of. So some of the ones that I've sort of identified are IT customers. So within my own department, they could be service or support, they could be IT security, they could even be my own team within the business analysis team. And sort of moving sort of slightly out, there's a couple of teams that sort of sit with one foot in IT and one foot in the business. So our procurement team and things like InfoSec and data governance and people like that. I have my business stakeholders. So often these are my end customers. I might have been asked to go and work on a project with a business department or a business team. Just trying to read what I've written on this. Manager, senior leaders. So I generally have to produce reports, I have to give status updates, but I'm also giving strategic input, and I've sort of mentioned at that sort of senior BA level that sort of it's feeding back into the strategy, giving updates on the project, how it's aligning to strategy, and taking on board that strategic direction as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those, while stakeholders, the key stakeholders are usually sponsoring a project and ultimately probably making decisions about careers and things like that, your manager, as to where you would go and or working with you to make careers about decisions about your career. So
absolutely,
those are key stakeholders. Yeah, great.
Then again, we've got a couple more. We've got students.
Yeah, the final end customer.
Yeah, absolutely. At the university for sure. You know, a different organisation. It might be you know, a sort of everyday person, general public. When I was at Severn Trent, it was sort of pretty much everybody in the Severn Trent catchment area. You know, anyone that consumes water, or business users as well. So it could be B2B, or it could be B2C, business to business or business to customer. And then sort of, again, sort of leaning to the more creative things that I do and the things that I do outside of my day job, it's the wider business analysis community. So as I said, I do a lot of blogging, I do a lot of knowledge sharing to the business analysis and I guess the wider IT community as well, through writing for industry publications, sort of writing to my LinkedIn network, my Twitter network. I sort of feel somewhat of an obligation to sort of keep giving content to those people. So yeah, I sort of view those as my personal customers. Right. And I guess as well, those freelance customers I have as well when I'm doing freelance writing work. So if I'm writing a blog article or doing social media coverage for a conference or for a company, they're my own sort of personal customers as well.
Right, so you've already started with building up a little set of some customers. Quite often we see people that develop a side business, you would say, a side hustle. Sometimes it remains a side hustle, and for other people it's interesting as they develop through their career, their side hustle can become stronger and can actually develop into a small business that they run on their own, or something that they keep developing further. In my career profession, I see a lot of people that step out of the HR area and move into coaching. I mean, the skills overlap a lot and work independently in small businesses. Writing's another one. It can be hard to make a living as a writer unless you're J.K. Rowland or somebody like that. But, you know, it helps you balance those sides. What I want to do now is come together with this. What does it really mean in this value proposition when you bring together those activities that you do, those resources you have, who you help? What is it, those really key things that define you, that add value for your customers? How do you help them? And what's special about that? What's unique about that?
So I think this was the bit I found the most tricky to come up with ideas around. And so again, going back to my stakeholders, I sort of came with coaching and facilitating stakeholders. So it is something from the workshop facilitation. I'm particularly good at sort of drawing out ideas and thoughts and sort of helping stakeholders to realize and understand what their needs are and what their requirements are. So I think that is something that I bring as a value. My sort of research and what's going on in industry. So rather than being sort of just within my organisation, I'm sort of looking out and sort of trying to keep abreast of everything that's going on. I'd say I'm an expert in workshop techniques, and it's a bit uncomfortable saying an expert, but having written an article on it and being published, I think I just about qualify. So I'd say that's something that's like a real strength. Yeah. And that experience in business analysis, I'm almost a subject matter expert in being a business analyst now. And I use that sort of coaching mentor team members and other people within the organisations. I use it to information share with my team internally, but other BAs in my wider community as well. So those are the sort of things I've come up with as a sort of value proposition, I guess.
I think for me, from what you've discussed in your career and some of the discussions that the audience won't be seeing, I think what I see is something which is quite unique is blending those two sides from the arts and the science side, or from the writing and blogging and acting, and pulling them together. The other one that I get a really strong feel about is this continuous growth and learning that you have with continually exploring new things and trying new things. And so you haven't identified that, but perhaps something to think about is this sort of creativity. You talked about the energetic, but the energy to be creative and try new things, and might be something else to also think about here in this area. So both the sort of, well, a unique combination of having exploring both this creative and the analytical side, and this sort of energy to keep learning and growing and developing, might be two things that I see coming out of here.
Great. Would you like me to add them? Shall I just
yes, we add them. What's always good to reflect on this with somebody else, because it's a useful way. What I would generally do now, which is very hard to try and do on a session like this, is that we would then work to try and come up with a sort of 6 to 10 word statement about what you do that adds value. So I help people by being able to solve problems, facilitate and get ideas from stakeholders, being an expert in business techniques. We've got too long now, but this is how I help people. So trying to come down to those ones which would almost be, when you go and meet somebody, your sort of pitch. Can you have a think about it? It's difficult to do on the spot, but you have to think about, if somebody said to you, so Rachel, what do you do? And you had to start the sentence, I help whoever to buy. What would you try and say there?
So I help my stakeholders, it's a bit of a catch-all, to understand what they need, to understand their problems, and to try and find a way forward by facilitating and coaching, I guess.
Facilitating and coaching. I guess it's still too long, using my creative and analytical skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is good. This is recorded because I think that's excellent. That would be the start, but then we would try and refine it further. I think we've had an excellent way of explaining this and demonstrating this to the people here, and really engaged to hear about your career history. And thank you so much for being willing to share it with other people.
No, thank you.
And it's a good way, I think, of people seeing how they could use this model here. I'm just going to switch back to the presentation now, and let me share the, so we've been through the model now, and really I think the big question is, so what? So for you, Rachel, how did you find that process? I don't know, surprise to the audience, we did have a run-through trial of this. It obviously takes a bit longer, but how did you feel about the process from both the run-through and sort of the demonstration today?
Yes, I think it was really useful to have the time to, it's only been a couple of days, but just to have a little bit of time to formulate my thoughts around it. So I'd recommend anyone wanting to try this to get a bit of quiet space. And I created quite a lot of post-it notes, it's the business analyst in me there. And that seemed to be a really good way to just get those thoughts out. I sort of did a workshop on myself almost. For a British person, it's actually quite hard to blow your own trumpet. I think culturally we're quite reserved and quite sort of modest. So actually it is quite tricky to sort of say, I think I'm good at this, I'm good at this. I sort of found myself blushing a little bit during some of those, but it's a good activity to do. And as regards the model, I think it's a really good way to start to really think about sort of your different assets, and not just think about what you do as a day job, because it's very easy just to go, this is my job and those are the things I do. Or actually you've got hundreds of transferable skills outside of that core day job. And it's quite a new way of thinking, I think, to go, oh, actually that hobby is a useful thing I can bring into my work. And that model seems to really help with that.
Great. It's great to hear those insights from you. And this piece wasn't practiced, so it's good, because I think it's a lot of what people do find is, and I thought why it would be so useful for business analysts to actually, as you said, apply a business model on yourself. And use those analytical skills that you already have to sort of analyze yourself. And a lot of people think, you know, there might be some secret thing that psychologists do, but actually it is often about reflecting back and hearing what people are saying and what they're thinking, and getting them to ask a few good questions and help them in other ways to think about something else and get those ideas, like we discussed, pulling in things from different parts of your life. So thanks very much for sharing that, Rachel, and it's great to hear your views. With most analysis, it's what you do afterwards, the so what. So on this one, I suggest it's about reflection, testing, and action. It's reflecting and it's discussing your business model with other people. Find a trusted friend, a person in your family. Can you explain those 6 to 10 USPs to that 6 to 10 word USP to them? Do they get it? Do they understand it? Also about testing it with potential customers or with your bosses, talking about career planning, see what they think about that. Does it resonate with their view of you? And finally, action. Depending on what you're planning on doing, are you looking for a new job, or you're looking to own your own business? I like to think about what I call planned happenstance. Is that if you know what opportunities would suit you when those opportunities arise, then you're in a good position to go out there and hopefully gain those opportunities. So then I think once you've got the so what's next, what's the next step, you can use the business model. One thing you could do is, once you've done your own personal business model, is look at the business model of your unit or your organisation or of your team and see how that fits. And if there's a good fit between the two of them, then you can generally get the idea that then you will find that's a successful job. Where there's not such a good fit, where there's challenges or there's skills, how can you also use those challenges or skills in another role or opportunity? Also, you can use this to create a good story about your career, the narrative, because people like to see how you move from one thing to another, how you bring in some customer service experience in this example, right back in early university days and through to a later stage. And also think about other business models that you could apply, a SWOT or any other business model, how you can use that to understand yourself. I'm sure a lot of people think that career planning is some mysterious black box, the same way as if I look into business analysis, I'm not sure what people do and don't really understand it as well. But actually it's not. It's really just trying to find ways of understanding yourself. It's good to reflect with a coach, to get some extra questions in there, but it is something we just basically use a model and think your way through it. And finally, have fun. It doesn't need to be serious. The final slide here, just before we finish, is here's the neural electronic board that you can see that demo. You can also wear the resources to download either the business model or the personal business model canvas, and check out more resources on my website. And then finally, just to say, in this virtual environment, do please get in touch person to person, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this at some later stage. Really look forward to hearing from you. Love to get in touch with people. And very finally, to say a very great thank you to Rachel for all of her sharing and sharing her personal knowledge. As she said, maybe it's not so easy for British people to talk about themselves, so it's done an excellent job here and been very open and honest in sharing this. So
thanks, Jen. Thank you for letting me take over the middle bit of your session as well.
It's great, and for those of you who are watching this now, we look forward to talking to you in the Q&A. Both of us will be there. Bye.